Okay, what we're going to look at today is one of the messages that we got out of the Torah study is that we're all going through trials, tribulations, and probably have a lot more to come. So what does that do to us? And what do we need to do? Well, the first thing we need to do is take courage. Who are we? We're the children of the Most High God. If we're believers, if we're trying our best to walk in His ways, who's going to watch out for us?
Help you while you're doing your driving and get your
Yes,
job,
we have
right?
one another, and that's
Okay.
important.
Good luck, buddy.
But who comes first? He does. And He has promised
I
to
thought he
never
was gone.
leave
He's
us,
in there
never
waiting for a
forsake
job,
us,
apparently.
always be with us, always keep His
They have
hand on
good
us.
hearing on here, so it's going to take some patience.
And even then, we all go through trials.
The sound.
Some of them can actually be traumatic. When we face these
I
trials,
thought he left.
what do we
Anyway, I'm
focus
going to have to
on?
listen now.
What's the first thing that comes to your mind? Well, what can I do to get out of this? What can I do to take care of this? Yes. Or do we focus on what we think? Well, I think this is really bad. Well, I think this may be leading to more problems.
Yeah.
I think that I'm not going to be able to get through this. I think.
Honey, I think we should bring some food up.
I think.
Sure, I'm off on mute here. Hold on. They must.
Or do we actually focus on Hashem? And that's your first feeling. Do we focus on Hashem? Realize that He's in control. If we don't keep linked up with Him, tied in with Him, then where's our hope? We've got to do what it says. And here's a good example. And I'll read it out of Devarim or Deuteronomy, chapter 3, verses 23 to 28. It says, I also pleaded with the Lord at that time, saying, O Lord God, you have begun to show your servant your greatness and your strong hand. For what God is there in heaven or on earth who can do such works and mighty acts as yours? Let me, I pray, cross over and see the fair land that is beyond the Jordan, the good hill country, and Lebanon. But the Lord was angry with me on your account and would not listen to me. And the Lord said to me, enough. Speak to me no more of this matter. Go up to the top of Mount Pisgah, and lift up your eyes to the west and to the north and south and east, and see it with your eyes. For you shall not cross over this Jordan, but charge Yehoshua and encourage him and strengthen him, for he shall go across at the head of this people, and he will give them as an inheritance the land which you will see. Well, this shows what Moshe was going through at the time. And the rabbinic tradition says that he actually begged God 515 times whether he could go in or not. That's a rabbinic interpretation. They did it by doing the gematria through the words, and that's the number they came up with. But 515 times. No wonder God said enough. But what are we going through, and why? Yes.
Is it fair to say?
Mike,
Sorry, I didn't put him out. My apologies.
The most important word you mentioned was if.
Yep.
Would it be fair to say that if we are obedient and walking His way, we go through trials.
Yep.
And those trials are for a reason and a purpose, not to negate them or avoid them, but to go through them.
Absolutely.
However, if
Yeah.
we are disobedient and don't walk in his ways,
Right.
there are consequences, there are discipline.
Absolutely.
And how often do we confuse one for the other?
But even the discipline is a challenge for us.
Yeah.
And we go through it for a reason.
Yes. So what is the point in trying to get out of it? Like,
Correct.
when I was a kid and my dad was gonna spank me, I found that running away was worse.
Yeah.
It's like going around that mountain one more time.
I mean, you're gonna take the whoop and just get it over with.
Get it over with. Yeah.
But the
And
trials
learn
and
your lesson.
tribulations, are we not to be thankful for them? But it
Yes.
says we are to be grateful in all things, because all things work together for good.
And that's exactly.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
why whine and snivel going through
Yaakov tells us, count it all joy, my brethren. When you, and this is the key word in that, when you experience various trials.
Yep.
God does not bring condemnation and punishment just for the sake of punishment. It's an if and then an action and a result. He lets us go as far as we have to go until we turn back to him and become obedient. We learn from that cycle, just like the Israelites learned from that cycle. I mean, how many times has God put us into a situation to make a good choice, correct?
We don't.
And we say, oh, this is what I want to do. And before you know it, you're back around that mountain again. So the if and the it really depends upon how we respond to the circumstances that we're in.
And it goes back to blessings or cursings.
Absolutely. Devarim 26, 27, and 28. If and then.
All right.
And this is one of the big things I stress in yeshiva is actions and results. Ifs and thens, right?
I have one other quick question. Pronouncing the name of God. Yahweh, Yahuwah, what?
Does it matter? We have no vowels.
Your best.
So you can get into that sacred name thing where people argue over, if you're not saying it this way, you're wrong. If you're not saying it that way, you're wrong.
In the Yohevah
Hashem,
is
his name.
Yeah.
And that's
the
just my
name.
opinion. That's just my opinion. You would have, okay.
What did you
Well,
say?
you're putting
You're
vowels
putting
in there,
vowels in it.
whether you realize it or not. But the,
Yud, hey, Vav, hey.
Say it again, Maria.
Yahava,
Say it again.
Yahava. Yud, hey, Vav, hey. Ha-yava. Ha, just ha, vaya.
What? I like Yahweh.
Yahweh, Hashem.
yeah. But what you said is exactly right. Yes, Fran.
I like to whitewash character a little bit of God, because when we read this particular verse, we put in our, the way we think it is, like you said, enough.
Yep.
What if God was so touched by Moses that he said, if Moses prays one more time, I'm going to give in. Because I know that when my children were little, and you went to punish them, and they would, Mommy, please, your heart would melt, and you said, oh, okay. If they say it one more time, I won't do it. And I think that's the way God said it. I don't think he said enough. I think he said it with love and compassion. Please don't bring them. This is what it is that with love.
He probably did,
So don't
but
say
either way,
enough. Say it with love.
but that was enough. But the point is, he had a reason for saying it. He had a reason for Moshe not going into the promised land. And actually, he had a couple of reasons, and we'll get to those in a little bit. But because of those reasons, as you said, we've got to own up to what's going on. We've got to know that we're in God's will. Now, what would have been worse for Moshe? Going into the land, going through all the trials like that, or going up to paradise? You know, we don't really think of that. And yes,
He actually
did
did
you,
get. the one that
did you,
After he died.
thank you, Bonnie.
Now, of transfiguration,
Mhm.
um, So. Whether he was. In his body.
You're not on. It was right in the middle.
Hear me now?
There you
Yep.
go.
But Moshe did get to enter the land. It was after his death, of course, but it was on the Mount of Transfiguration.
Right. Yeah. So. And then another example, and this is one we probably don't even look at, Yeshua. Have we looked at what he went through? It says in Matthew, chapter 26, verse 39. And he went a little bit beyond them and fell on his face and prayed, saying, my Father, if it is possible, let this cup pass from me, yet not as I will, but as you will. In this case, Yeshua was the same. He knew what he had to go through. He knew what the pain and the suffering would be, and as he was in a mortal body, would want to go through that. It said when he came out, he was unrecognizable as a man. That's not something I would look forward to. And if I knew I had to go through it, I would probably ask to get out of it also.
What verse is that?
Matthew 26:39. But Yeshua, first of all, he made an agreement back when he was with Abraham, when he and the Father made the covenant. They passed through the cut up animals, and they said, if this covenant isn't kept, let this happen to me as it did to this animal. So he knew what was going to happen right from that point. There's a purpose. We need to serve God's will. How many times have we gone through something traumatic in our lives? And then maybe years later, we found out that, well, somebody else is going through that. But now, since I've had that experience, I can help them. If I hadn't been through the experience, how could I help them? It's always, and this is one of Carol's examples too. If I was a Catholic priest and you came to me for marriage counseling,
What kind of credibility would
what
you
kind of
really have?
credibility would I have? You know, if I haven't been through it, if I haven't experienced it, how would I know?
You see that so many times when people come up and they've lost a child or they've gotten a bad diagnosis. And someone will come up and say, well, I know just how you feel. Well, unless, you know, there's an old Indian saying, unless you've walked a mile in my moccasins, you really don't know. So sometimes God allows experience so that he perceives what we will need in the future, or how he'll be able to use us in the
Absolutely.
future. We need to.
A real good example I like is another one that Carol has said. She was a nurse, and As such, she had to treat injured children. And you go ahead and explain that.
We had a little 3.5-year-old girl in, we were one-on-oneing. She had developed a bone marrow disease. And it was from the fact that her dad was spraying for ants and she dropped her ice cream cone and picked it up and ate it. And it destroyed her bone marrow. And so she was dying. And she was Hispanic, didn't speak any English. And we were one-on-oneing. And I went in to take a report and, doing your check when you first go in. And all of a sudden she sat bolt upright in bed. And she said something. And of course, I don't speak that much Spanish. I can tell you to go to the bathroom or if you have pain, but that's, and laid down and basically died. And her family wasn't with her. So I asked the nurse's aide that was there, what did she say? And she said, Father, I want to go home. And there's no doubt in my mind that she saw Yeshua coming to get her because it was very peaceful. I want to go home. And God took her home. But because of that particular incident, I could no longer work in pediatrics because I had small children at home. And it touched my heart. Same way that, we all work oncology. We take turns, right? When my son was diagnosed with cancer, it's a whole different set of feelings and emotions when you treat those people with cancer. But I can relate to someone now. When they say, my son, my daughter, my brother, I know that sinking feeling in their heart. And I know the fear. I don't care how much you trust in the Lord. There's still that fear, trepidation, I guess is a better word, in your heart. So I think God takes us through those circumstances. I was married to a pastor, got divorced. When that happens, you lose your church, you lose your church family, and basically you become blacklisted. I don't care if you didn't do anything, right? But I can talk to people now that their whole life was in the church and now they don't have a life in the church because I know the feelings. So I think God allows us to do that.
So God puts us through or allows us to go through things at times so we can have the experience. Because we can get that experience, we can help each other.
We have the compassion, we have the understanding, we have the words to say.
And the one thing we need to do is take courage.
Take courage.
Remember, you're here not just for yourself, but we're here to support one another. When you can be able to help one another and know that somebody's been through that, and you can go to them and ask them, well, can you help me through this? Or I'm facing this problem. What do you think I should do? If they've never been through it, they probably can't help you. But you gotta have the freedom to be able to go to them. Yes, Gary.
But I think it's also extremely important that people feel safe
Yes.
and
Absolutely,
comfortable
100%.
to approach somebody and ask for that help without being condemned or ridiculed or belittled. And I think that is an extremely big problem because people either feel that they're not important enough to people.
You're right.
That they are not worthy enough for people. The problem is too overwhelming. They don't care. They're not concerned.
Judgmental.
They're doing so perfect and well. They don't have any problems.
Yeah.
And that feeling inside people, and from history past of being burned before, confidence is being broken.
Yep.
Absolutely.
There's a lot of extremely wounded people.
Yes.
And dealing with wounded people, as you know, as being a nurse, you have to be very, 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 very gentle and loving and kind. And
Yes.
I don't see as much of that as should be.
One of the most encouraging things you can do, and I can tell you, because I don't care if you've never experienced, one of the most encouraging things you can do is just to tell somebody, you know something, I care for you. and I'm concerned. And I am here if you ever want to talk. It'll be confidential. And even if you just need to sit and cry, call me. I want to support you. That's one of the, if you don't know anything else to say,
Yeah.
I'm there. I'm there. I'm not judging. I'm not giving you advice. I'll tell you sometimes when you're in this situation, don't give me advice. Just listen to me. Just be there. Just show me that you care about me.
Being a counselor,
Me there.
that's one thing. Yeah, that's one thing I found out too. What you say, Gary, is absolutely correct. Unless you can be compassionate with the person, unless you can let them know that it's safe, it's useless. Empathy. Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, even as a counselor, I've got that problem a lot of times approaching other people. Is it safe? Do I dare tell them that? You know? But it works both ways. And that's why you need to get together as a family. When you come in here, the closer you can get, the safer it is.
This needs to be, if nothing else, the first safe place should be your home. But the next safe place should be the body that surrounds you.
Yeah.
And you've got to be judicious. I'm not saying everybody that walks in, everybody that you don't want to go up and say to Joe Blow, but there should be enough of a relationship. We should be building relationships, right? That's the whole thing about being a body, is building relationships. So that you say, you know something, I feel a connection to Carol. And I feel safe enough to go up and tell her, you know something, I'm really having a bad day. And would you just stand with me? Would you just stand with me? One of the hardest things that ever happened is when I had to leave the church because, you know, it was all my fault. But anyway, we had to leave the church. And judgmental. You know, people would look at you and judge you. And I can tell you right now, I look great, I think. You know, I look like I'm healthy, big top buildings with a single bound, all that kind of stuff. But that's not always the way it is. I deal with chronic issues. And I'm not going to cry. There are several people in this congregation that I feel safe saying, you know, sometimes I'm really having a bad day. And they understand. They don't have to say anything. All they have to do is say, you know something, Phil, I understand. And I'll be praying for you. But if you don't have that in your home and you don't have it in the body, the world's not going to give it to you.
Yep. So
there.
So Moshe had to be obedient to the word of Hashem, who said that only Yehoshua and Caleb would enter. And Yehoshua had to, and this is your next bill, and take over the leadership of the people. So that was what God had planned. That's what he intended to begin with. So they had to go through with that. So that's one of the reasons. Sorry if I missed that. Yeah, the other one was 515 times. So Yeshua had to keep the promise he made in Bereshit 15, and that if the covenant could not be kept, it to him as it was to the animals. And that's what he did. It was a payment of a debt. So then Yeshua could send the Ruach HaKodesh to guide us, and that's guide is your next fill-in into his promises. And we've all gone through hard times. Now, can we use those hard times to help others? So
We're splitting this, right?
Yep.
Well, I think the biggest thing that we want to get across today is to have courage. You know, in our times, you know, you turn the news on, and it's like, oh, the world's coming to an end, right? We're going to heck in a handbasket. I mean, all these terrible things we hear all the time. But God never says, look at the world. You take the world's point of view. Boy, it's going to be rough down here. He always says, take courage. Take courage. You know, we shouldn't let that worry get us down. I know, you know, that sounds kind of bad, but you know, Moshe started out as a basket case, and look where he turned out. Right? I have a little humor. But, you know, have you ever felt so discouraged you just want to throw the towel in? You don't get the, you got it? Does everybody get it? Okay, all right, sorry. Okay, you know, sometimes we just get weary from doing good. We just get weary, you know, and sometimes I feel like I have about as much courage as a scaredy cat. You know, it's like, oh no, or, you know, maybe like the Lion and the Wizard of Oz. Nothing was really wrong. Life is good, but there's just so much going on, especially in our world today. And, you know, have you ever felt that life just brings discouragement? Shake your heads, yes or no. Okay, this is a participation. Sometimes you do. And you even, Shaul mentioned it. He says, don't get weary doing good. So we need to think about this. How I know I'm feeling good right now, but I'm not going to turn the news on. If I turn the news on, I'm not going to listen to marathon all day long. You know, what is it that we're going to do? So one of the things I want you to do is to just think about maybe one or two ways that you're discouraged at the moment. Now, we are a little bit discouraged with a grandson. You know, that never happens, right? But talk to him. When all this came about, I made a point of calling each and every child and grandchild and saying, where do you stand with the Lord? Well, my son and daughter-in-law and their family, they're standing. My daughter and her husband, they believe, but they're not really standing. One of my granddaughters said, well, we believe in a higher power. And I said, well, what's its name? You know, it could be a head of cabbage. I don't know. And I asked my grandson, and this is the one that just absolutely floored me. Nana, I've had too much school.
Had too much what?
School. I've had too many classes in psychology. I've had too many classes in physiology. I've had too many classes in sociology, ology, right? And he says, I don't believe in that anymore. And I said, well, there's going to come a day when you'll either believe or you're going to go someplace you don't want to go. And I don't want to see that in your life. So we're talking to our great-grandchild about that. So I sometimes think that college is not where the kids need to go anymore. But we all need encouragement. Do you know that encouragement is the oxygen for the discouraged soul? You ever thought about that? If there's no encouragement, the soul becomes discouraged. Absolutely, doesn't it? Now, I know that you have all, you know, read the parashah from Vayichan, and it was a little bit discouraging. But what we want to get out of it is that there is courage. There is encouragement out there. So the challenge of reading the Davarim, book of Davarim, is that, yes, it is discouraging. You know, the Hebrews did a lot of really stupid stuff, right? So do we. They had to go around that mountain 40 years. From my lips to God's ear, I don't want to go around through the same mountain 40 years. I need encouragement. So in this book, we also see that God's law is not some rigid set of impersonal rules. If you ever read the Ten Commandments and you don't look at a gracious, merciful God, they sound kind of condemning, don't they? They really do. I've heard a lot of people say, well, I'm not gonna do that. You know, there's no fun in doing that. But his laws really are not to be discouraged. They are an encouragement. How many of you like good, steady parameters? You like structure. You want to know, yeah, I'm not going to stick my foot in, the meat grinder. Yes, that's an owie. I'm not going to run out in traffic. I'm not going to, We-
One thing you want to look at in this too. If you were entering a new community, would you want to go into one who you knew was obedient to the local rules? Or would you rather go into one that you know was disobedient?
Well, look at Portland. Look at Seattle right now.
Portland and Seattle?
Would you like to go move into the center of Portland? What's happening in Portland? I have a nephew that moved out of Portland because there was gunshots in his neighborhood. It's lawless.
Flawless. The police.
So is downtown Seattle right now. It's lawless, as well as many other places.
Well,
LA.
But LA's not quite that bad yet,
Oh,
but it's getting there.
I don't know if anybody of you knew about Martin Luther King Drew Hospital, corner of Compton and East LA. Is that a real safe place? No, I put that hospital, the computers up in that hospital, wrote the programs. And I would say, I need to be on the 405 before dark. Right? I mean, when you have to open up your laptops and go through airport security to get in and out of the hospital, and we have 2 police stations in the hospital, yeah, I don't want to do that. But God's laws, his Torah, right? Really, we're going to find out in class that encompasses a lot more than that. It's his testimony of the witness who he is. But one of the things that you find out is that he wants us to prosper. And he established those rules and regulations, the mitzvah, because he wants a relationship. That would be like Doug and I being married and saying, honey, I love you very much, but I'm never going to talk to you. And I don't care what you would like me to do. I'm going to do what I want to do.
Not the way it comes.
Hey, we'll drive it home together. But that's not a relationship. So God says, this is my side of this is my relationship. When we said our vows, this was the beginning of a relationship. And that's the same thing with God. And his relationship is he's saying, I am the king. I am God and you are not.
I have thought of this and I keep thinking, what did the Christians, the early Christians do when they had to face the arena with being eaten by lions? Did they go to church and the pastor would say, if you get caught, this is what they're going to do. They're going to have lions that's going to tear into your flesh. Can you imagine? They didn't talk like that.
No, they
But
spoke words
look
of
at what happened to the Christians during the pandemic. We crumbled.
we become weak.
So what should we do? I think we should cancel all Torah studies because I'm leaving it there.
Do you know that they actually drew straws for the privilege of going first? They drew straws for the privilege of going in first. More people were won to Yeshua as their savior from watching the things that were going on in the arena than the apostles ever touched.
What's happening now? Watching the Christians, you're falling away.
Well, you know something, but we're coming into that time. So it's time to, put on our big girl and big boy pants and be who God called us to be.
Now, that's one thing right there. You're saying, you're using the term Christians. And I think there's a difference. There's some people that are believers that have
They've got fire
They
insurance.
got fire insurance and that's it. I don't really consider them full Christians. When you're Christian,
Now is what you're thinking.
yes.
Christians have.
Were totally different.
And
They
that's what
had,
I'm,
yes,
that's
they
what
had
I'm
to
saying.
take a stand from the very beginning. Yes, ma'am.
I don't know if any of you listen to Dennis Prager on the radio, but he loves Christians, true Christians.
Yes,
And he said they're being persecuted throughout the world.
Yes,
Africa
exactly.
and Europe and in France. They're just told they're being killed and slaughtered.
Yep.
The media is not reporting on
no,
it.
no.
It's like, nobody knows about it, but, he is so, proud of the Christian Judeo, ethic, and he said Christians stand up for things that the Jews don't
That's
stand
right.
up for.
Absolutely.
And, he's very, he's good.
And there's gonna be a special place for those that were martyred.
And Maria, I think your example was more what you see around here in the United States.
And
When you
unfortunately,
look at a lot of the churches that are coming up in Muslim areas.
Yeah.
Those people are strong, they're together. The people, a lot of the people, especially the ones that are in areas that are really persecuted, they're the ones that are strong,
well, that's where you grow through persecution.
and they're the ones like the old church. And that's what we want to be.
Absolutely, absolutely. So when really the whole book of Davarim is a lesson about relationships, all relationships.
Yep.
God and man and man and man, all relationships. You know, we don't really think about what God is trying to tell us. We get so encompassed with the story. Now, how many of you, if you were in Shabbat school or Sunday school, the flannel board, 10 Commandments, right? I'm dating myself. Or, let's make a tabernacle with popsicle sticks, all those kind of things. But that's not what we're talking about. What a striking statement that God said, I have given you this land. I have given you this land. It was his land to begin with. It's a striking statement. God's promises are so sure that God can speak of what he intends as though it was already completed. Now, do we take that word?
Is anybody in here for the creation study a number of years ago?
Yes.
And, Bruce was talking about the tohu and the
Mhm.
bohu.
Right.
Mhm.
And I was talking to Valerie last week, and she compared it to Hebrews 11:1.
Yes.
Now, faith is the tohu being the faith, and the bohu being the assurance that, the
Mhm.
final outcome.
Exactly.
Yeah, I thought that was amazing.
Yes. We have to face reality. We can't, stick our heads in the ground like a ostrich and say, well, everything's gonna be okay. We're not gonna have to suffer any of this. People are suffering all over the world. They're crucifying people in the Middle East. But we over here in the United States are being insulated or isolated because of the news. We don't know about that. So therefore, we're not getting strong. We're a bunch of little babies sucking on pablum for the majority. We haven't matured, but it's about facing reality. Moshe explains something of his own motives for sending the spies out of the promised land. He said, we need to know what's going on out there. We don't want to be stupid. We need to know what's going on in the world today. We don't need to focus on it because that is the world's reality. But what is our reality in God? He is in control, correct?
Back to the beginning. That's why we need to take courage.
Absolutely. So it's not wrong to find out what's going on in the world. We need to know. We need to know what's happening with our schools. We need to know what's happening on our city level and our legislative level. We need to know that, not to be discouraged, but to be involved, right? And we need to realize that the world's reality should not be our reality. Right? After all, whose reality is the ultimate reality? God. God's reality. So whatever difficulties that seem to lie ahead of us, we need to follow God's leading, and we need not to be afraid. Now that's hard, but even more important, we need not to be discouraged. When I have people say, oh my gosh, this is happening, God's in control. God sets up governments, he tears down governments. God brings riches, he takes riches away. Right? God is in control. And in fact, God said to Moshe 2 times in a short period of time, do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged. We need to write that on our hearts. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Sir, 1 or 2. She was first.
We should learn how to speak like God. 'Cause
Yes.
God would say, I'm going to destroy you, but. So we should learn how to say, I'm going to fall into that river, but if I take a life raft or something, I will be saved. Instead of just thinking, I'm going to fall in that river and drown and die.
God never told you to take your brain out and play with it.
God always said, but
Plan. No. Plan and no. Yes, sir.
Psalm 23, verse 1.
Yes.
Do I walk through the valley of the shadow of death?
Yes.
I will fear no evil.
That's right.
Well, do we actually believe that or not?
Well, we should.
Exactly. We should. You know, another thing I was thinking, reading this morning, you know, we talked about Moses.
Mhm.
Yeah. We talked about Joshua.
Yep.
Yeah. We really seldom ever talk about Caleb.
That's true.
Caleb was a Gentile.
He went into the wilderness at 40. He went into the promised land at 80.
Mm-hmm.
5 years of conquering with Joshua.
Yep.
And then he got an inheritance.
Yes, he did.
Yes. Because as it says, he holy, Wholly, W-H-O-L-L-Y.
Right.
Holy did what God told him.
Absolutely. 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 That's wonderful. Yeah. Don't make us say that.
I need Maria. And I need more coffee.
You know, the problem with Israel was that despite of all the evidence of God's care, provision, and protection, they still did not trust him.
Yep.
How many times? Are we any different? We're not, are we? We're absolutely no different. Their rebellion was a direct result of fear.
Yep.
Fear that flared up and went to terror so great that they no longer saw God as who he was. Let's look at the way that they were taken into captivity. I mean, they played the Egyptians against the Babylonians or the Assyrians, and whoever was going to give them the most protection is the one that they sided with. God was in control. And God even said, you know something? If you don't stop this stuff, get it straight, I'm going to let him put a hook in your jaw and take you out there buck naked. And he did. And he did. And God tells us the same things today. You know, we need to stop and think, what has God taken me through? Now, I think each and every one of us has something that God has taken us through that we can look back and say, God was there.
I think one of the big problems we have today is the same thing that the Hebrew children had back in the day. They were listening to the wrong thing.
Yep.
They were listening to the wrong people. I mean, case in point, when they came back to give the report, yes, this is a land full with milk and honey. Look at the fruit we brought back. But instead of listening to the 2, they listened to the 10.
Yes.
Which started the whole mess for them. But we're no different. We look at the news, we want to listen to the people who bark the loudest, but those aren't necessarily the people we need to be listening to.
Absolutely. You stop and think about what we're hearing even from church leaders today. Take the vaccine. Right? Well, I mean, I actually heard somebody say the other day, I'm not going to mention names. Well, the government really has our best interest at heart. And I'm going, away, right? But how many of our young adults today believe that? And are we, as the generation who are supposed to be more mature in the Lord, how many of us are telling them, you know something, I have got something that is bigger, that is more honest, that is true, that is stronger than any government, and he's taking care of me. And you know something, even if I have to say taking care of me is taking me home.
Yep.
What better way when things get really upside down? Lord, hey, take me home.
Go back to the people who were thrown into the arena.
Yes,
What were they saying? Saying,
they were singing songs of
Singing.
praise.
they were praising. Not
Yes.
because of the pain they were gonna have to go through, but they knew what the results were. I'll be in paradise.
I have to laugh.
Plus,
Yes,
all the people that will be saved because of me.
I have to laugh, that our son is a believer, a strong believer.
Yep.
But he had an experience with God about a month ago.
Yeah.
Now, and we went over to his house and he was saying, Mom, I know where I'm going. I don't care how bad this gets, Mom. I know where I'm going. And I'm telling everybody that will listen to me because I don't want to leave anybody here because, Mom, I know where I'm going. Now, how many of us today look at our neighbors, even look at our kids and say, you know something, this world sucks. But you know something? I don't care what this world does to me. I know where I'm going.
Yeah. Yeah. So the only way that evil triumphs is when we forfeit.
Mhm. Oh, I may have not even given you anything to put in. I'm sorry.
You know, one of my daughter's favorite quotes is the only thing necessary for evil to triumph is for good men to do nothing.
Absolutely.
She loves that quote.
Exactly.
Absolutely. And unfortunately, we as believers become those good men. We've got a secret we're not going to tell anybody.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Another way to look at it, from my background.
Yep.
And as my function here with security,
Oh, yeah.
we are a hostile force.
Yep.
Behind enemy lines in hostile territory,
Yeah,
and everybody's hunting us.
that's right.
That's very true.
We don't belong here.
The earth, this is not my home.
We are behind enemy lines.
Yep.
Well, and you know that the army consists of 4 levels. I've probably said this before.
Yep.
I have. You didn't give them that or that.
I thought I did.
You can be on active duty. We're armed, ready for the fight, correct? We know who our commander in chief is. We have got his directives. We know the victory is ours. We just have to fight the battles, correct? And he's even with us in them. Or you can be a reserve, you can be retired. Oh, how many people do we have in the church today that are retired? We do, don't we? Well, you know something? I taught Sunday school, I did this, I did that, and now I'm X years old, and now it's time for somebody else to do it.
Yeah.
We sit, stay, and squat. Right? Pass the torch without preparing as Timothy. We've got to prepare Timothy, but they can be called out of retirement.
Right.
If things get bad, they'll call you out of retirement. And then you better be ready to go, correct? So you've got to be prepared along that way. Or you can be a reservist. And people say, well, you know something? I guess if nobody else will do it, I'll do it until you find somebody. I'm back this way, I'm sorry. Do it just until you find somebody, because my heart's not really in it, and you know, you can be a reservist. You can put in your, 30 days or 60 days a year and be gone, right? Or you can be AWOL. You're not even there anymore, but we're in the army. We don't have a choice. We've been sealed. We are now part of the army of God, but it's up to us to decide, are we going to take courage and be on active duty, or are we going to be AWOL in the middle of the fight? AWOL?
That's AWOL.
Well, but you know something? I think God turns them over. He says, you don't want anything to, you're saved, but you know something? You don't want anything to do with me in your current life? Good luck. That says terrible, doesn't it?
But that's,
We retire when we're dead.
that's what it's
That's
supposed
what's
to.
supposed to be. Never,
what it's
nowhere in the
supposed to
scriptures does it say that you reach your retirement age.
Anybody in the military will tell you. You need basic,
Yes,
you need specialized training.
yes,
You need to know your weapons.
Yes.
You need to be proficient in weapons.
yes.
You need intel, you need recon. Pastor Bruce has been going on this,
That's exactly right.
but most of us are running out in the battlefield with our underwear, waving our Bible,
Yes.
because we can command demons all over the place.
Yeah,
We get our butt whooped.
Absolutely, absolutely. And you know, the other thing about that is you've got to stay fit. And how do you stay fit? You stay fit by being in the Word and making it a reality in your life.
but,
Going back to what you first said. First and foremost, you have to be obedient.
yes,
Yes, it's
absolutely.
all about obedience.
Without obedience, there is no right. Without faith, there is no right.
Well, you gotta follow the word. That's what it's all about.
Or else you're out there in your underwear.
Absolutely. Actions, results, if and then. Yes, ma'am.
You want it in the middle.
Hello? There you go.
Um, but when God set up the tabernacle, the Levites had an age limit.
Mm-hmm,
They were to serve until they were, I believe, 60.
mm-hmm,
Was it 50?
mm-hmm.
Yeah, and then they had to step down and let the younger Levites.
But
come
they
in.
could still help.
No, they were used to train
Yeah,
the new ones.
right, but they're not doing the actual service.
Correct.
Well, and I think about, look at the average length of life at that particular time. Active life. You know?
Yeah.
In our particular church, we are a congregation of older people.
Unfortunately, that's true.
That's true. But have we identified a Timothy? Each one of us has special gifts and callings. Each one of us should have a Timothy.
Yep.
Or do we place ourselves or multiply ourselves? And we stay and squat.
Sure.
Just one more question to ask him. Well, I will pull another one. Can you all hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Oh, no, you're working.
Well, we'll repeat it. We'll repeat it.
No, he
We'll
needs his
repeat it.
mic. Oh,
Yeah, just say, you just say it full and I'll repeat it for you. I'll repeat it for you.
I was just gonna ask you when you said about us dying or being dead, but I mean, do we die? I don't think. we don't die.
Everybody
The wage of sin is death.
Physically, our body dies.
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
Yeah, 'cause I-
We transfer.
When my,
When your body,
When the physical body
Or your physical,
perishes.
but it can still like.
when my heart stops and I put the meat suit in the ground,
Yes.
then I'm done with here.
So we're at.
But
so we're
until
at-
that point,
Right?
see from my perspective, from a martial arts standpoint, you have the student who is trained by his master to a point where they become the master. And then they function in that role up until the point where they now train the new student. It is a debt that is passed down from master to student that cannot be repaid.
Yep.
The man who trained me, I cannot repay him for what he gave me. However, I can honor that debt by passing that knowledge on to my student.
we are to replicate ourselves.
But instead of not only replicate myself, like I told my students in my studio years ago, it is my job to make you better than I was.
Absolutely.
And a lot of people have a pride issue with that, well, I'm the master and nobody will ever exceed me. No, it is my job, if I'm a good teacher, that my students excel and go beyond
That's right.
me. That's the mark of a good teacher.
Yeshua said the same things to his disciples.
And that's one of the things we're striving for here in this Torah study. And that's why it's an open forum. It's not just what we're presenting up here. It's also your opinions coming back and tying the two together so everybody grows.
But the thing I fear is, as you said, we are becoming a geriatric
Yes.
congregation.
Absolutely.
Well, that's true.
And that knowledge, that experience, and that training is not being passed down.
That's why Davarim was written. Did you ever think about that? Because that whole generation that stood at the foot of Mount Sinai, unless they were children, passed away. So Moshe is now saying, let me tell you again what God did.
Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Great.
So, what we're reading says that fears will come, and they will. I mean, nobody is really excited about what we may have to go through, correct? But we're still looking away. We need to look away from what causes the terror to remember who God is and what wonderful things he has done for us. The memory of God's work in our life is to quiet our fears, to restore our trust, and to be the oxygen for our discouragement. So the feeling I have is fear is an enemy of faith.
Yeah, and that goes back into what we were just saying. The only way evil triumphs is when we forfeit. And that's your next fill-in. On number 7.
When we what?
When we forfeit. In other words, when we give it up. It's not when we lose, it's when we quit trying.
I think I was having a hard time hearing him.
Apathy, and that's your next fill-in. Apathy is evil's best weapon. Well, I don't think the government's really that bad. I'll just sit here and wait and see what happens. Or, I really trust them. They're our elected officials. They've got apathy is their best weapon. And if we sit back and just let it happen, it's going to happen. That's one thing about Hashem. He's a father. And what does a good father do? He disciplines. But the other thing is, he does not enable. If we are pursuing a path that is wrong and we refuse to take his word and come back in the line, he's going to let us go as far as we have to and reap the consequences until we come back. He is not an enabler. He's not going to say, oh, that's okay. He says, well, I'll protect you so far, but if you go beyond that, I can't be with you.
Dr. Dobson has a really cool statement. They put one big hairy, and that's kind of like what we do sometimes. We put one big hairy toe over the line, and God said, that's not okay.
We need to remember on this, evil is not strong enough to overcome good.
Not if you stand.
But guess what? You've got to activate it. You've got to work in it. It's got to come from you. You know, it's not a one thing, and that's one thing with the congregation. If we don't see the good in others, and if we don't come together as a family where we can see the good in others, yeah, everybody's got bad points. Everybody's got their troubles, but if we can come together like you would a family, how are you going to treat a brother? How are you going to treat a sister? How are you going to treat a daughter or a son? Yes, Bonnie.
We really do need to come together as a congregation, because I keep thinking about what Pastor Bruce says, you know, it's gonna come to a time
Yep.
where I may not be able to trust my children, I may not be able to trust my sister, my aunt, my uncle. And what I have right here is the only thing I'm gonna be able to trust in.
And that seems to be something I read in the Word.
And even in the church, you still have to be careful.
Oh, yeah, you do. Yes, Gary.
You remember the Waltons?
Yep.
Families, multi-generational, grandparents, parents, children living in the home. Well, we kind of returned to that in a sense. Where the
Correct.
kids went to college, they can't find a job, they move back with their parents. So we're moving towards that multi-generational family in the home. With that said, this is what I foresee.
Yeah. And it's happening.
No,
now.
no. I'm going further.
Okay.
This is what I foresee. Instead of multi-generational single families in a home, going on what she was saying, what Bonnie was saying, I foresee multiple families living together in the same home.
Yeah.
What is coming? Now listen, this is what is coming.
Yep.
The way the climate change, the droughts, the
Absolutely.
food, the economy, energy.
Yep.
Okay. That we are going to have to come together almost in a kibbutz style of living
Yep.
to support each other, to work with each other, co-op type of farming, co-op type of defense.
Yep.
And if we do not build those relationships now,
Exactly.
then
Exactly.
it ain't gonna happen then, because how do I know I can trust you?
Exactly. I completely agree.
And the sad thing to me is Pastor Paul has worked diligently for years to try to bring this about.
Yep.
And he gets flashed in the pan interest, and then
Yep.
people fall away. You don't prepare for war after it's already
Right.
begun. I mean, that is the epitome of idiocy and foolishness.
Yep.
A wise man foreseeth the evil and prepares himself. The foolish go on and they are punished. That's Proverbs 22:3 something.
Yep.
That's what's coming. And our
It's already started.
survival will depend upon that.
Yep. Well, it actually happened when the church was first formed.
What goes around comes around.
Yep.
And those are the
Absolutely.
same principles that a Jewish community is formed. If you have a minyan, you form a community, correct? Correct? There are a lot of places right now that are people who have 20 acres of land, their families are now building on that same land.
Yep,
We probably, I mean, nobody can live on my land. I mean, if you've been to my house, you know, we have lots, correct? But you develop the relationships that will support each other. People that you can trust, relationships. You know, God's all about, and that's what we're talking about. God's all about relationships. And that's where it needs to start. Pastor Paul has done that. I know I need to move up. I walk. Pastor Paul has done that. We've done some food preservation classes. We have said, you know, that get a small group together, people you can trust, buy in bulk. There's things that you can do, but it's an army. An army brings its supplies with them. They don't go out to the neighbors when they're in the middle of war and say, you know, knock on somebody's door.
I've been doing this since the late eighties.
yep.
You know, so anyway, I'll come back to it when I remember what I was gonna say.
Okay,
That's a good example of a senior moment.
It's okay, Gary, it's still all.
okay. So what we need to remember though with all this, where is the battle?
Who and what are we battling?
The battle is within ourselves,
I remember.
okay? But that's your next fill-in, is battle is within ourselves. Go ahead, Gary.
It doesn't work unless it becomes a lifestyle.
Yes.
You're exactly right.
You can't do a couple of things and go back to what you think is normal.
You're exactly right.
It has to be an ongoing, daily, regular lifestyle, or it doesn't stay.
Yeah, that's the same with almost anything you do. If you make it your lifestyle, that's what's gonna stick. Pastor Paul made an interesting point yesterday. He says, how many of us pray after meals? Very simple thing. One out of how many? Is that part of our lifestyle? Is that one thing that we can't come together on? I mean, it's such a simple thing. It doesn't cost you anything. Yet, where's our lifestyle? And that's part of coming together. That's part of getting us together as ehad, as one. When we start doing things together. I mean, it's a simple thing. Yes, Janie.
I had several miracles happen to me within the last 48 hours. And Hannah was always asking me, she's with me this week, and she said, well, why do you always call these miracles, Baba, instead of blessings? I said, well, you can interchange those things, but I said, in my life, they are definite miracles. Because we have to also depend on who God sends with whatever God sends to us, because I was out of eggs this week. And that was an unusual situation, but nonetheless, some of the egg prices, they'll go up to $8 or $10 for 18, and then they'll go down for a while, then back up again. It fluctuates. And I was telling the Lord that, you know, that's the person that we should go to first to ask what we do next.
Absolutely.
Because I told the Lord, I said, you know, Lord, I need more eggs. I don't have the money to spend the high prices for them. I don't have time to go to Costco and get a better deal there. But I didn't give all the details to the Lord because he already knows all of that stuff. And I just filled in for a friend yesterday at a local thrift store. And while I was there filling in for her, a total stranger walks into the store, buys a couple of items, and then says to me, would either one of you ladies need some eggs? I'm going out of town and I have chickens and I have eggs. Would you please find out? if there's anyone that works here that needs eggs, and I said, I need eggs. I mean, I was so amazed that the Lord had provided for something that I could take care of myself, but I think that what the Lord is teaching me is total trust in Him for every single detail.
Amen. Yes, he is. And that's my next statement is here. What or who do we really rely on? You know, when we're going into time of needs, are we getting the courage from Hashem? Or are we relying on our own works? Or are we relying on what we can do? And yes, we do have a job to do as he directs us. And we need to get in there and do what he is telling us to do. Yes, Maria.
Now, I came from a generation that if I studied enough, and if I studied hard
Yep.
enough, I can even be president of the United States.
Yep.
Now, my grandchildren and my children are in a generation, if I don't go to school, if I don't have a diploma, that's okay. I'll just get Social Security. I don't have to work. I'll just stay home.
Yep.
And the government will take care of me.
Yep.
So where as Christians do we stand?
Well, that's the whole point.
I have a thing I put on my refrigerator because I'm from the same generation.
Well, so
Right.
far.
And so's Doug. And it says, it's not about what I do. God is more interested in who I am. You know,
And you know, to a certain extent, both cultures are correct. Because both cultures are relying on what I do or what I don't do. Instead of entering into who he is and how can I serve him. When we enter into how can I serve him and what can I do to better other people's lives, then you're working in him. Then you're doing what you're supposed to do. And guess what? He rewards those who are faithful. That's why we need to take courage in all this stuff. Look to who is really responsible. Stop looking at us. Stop looking at all this. Yes.
I believe that when the children of the past generation learned to read, they read from the Bible.
Yep.
And whatever they learned, it came out of the Bible.
Yep.
Now, we don't even have the word of God in the classroom, much less
Not
the Bible.
anymore. You're right. That's why it's up to us now to teach our children and our grandchildren and our great grandchildren.
I don't have time. I'm on my cell phone.
Hey, video games.
Yep.
There's video games. Throw that men.
So bottom line here is we must always, and this is your fill-in, seek his will. We need to look at what God wants us to do and how he wants us to do it. Now, he's put us in a community and there's support within the community, but nobody's reaching out to it, just like Gary has said. If we don't start coming together, what's the point? The old church was an example to us. The whole word is an example to us. If we're not following his example, his word, if we're not willing to come together and support one another in everything, we're not doing his word. How can we expect him? How can we expect him to support us if we're not doing his will?
the world isn't going to encourage us.
Right,
They're going to discourage us.
absolutely.
We need to encourage each other.
Yep. Rabbi Shaul implores us to be on guard, to watch out for what's going on. We need to be aware not only of our daily circumstances, and that's your next fill-in, But this next one is really what's important, not just our daily circumstances, but also the opportunities. That's your next fill in. And why do I say that? Each circumstance provides us with an opportunity. And that opportunity is either to learn, to get stronger, or to help somebody, or a combination of them. So are we taking advantage of it? Yeah, Gary.
It's been my experience that if we don't step up to take advantage of that,
Yep,
it passes us by to someone else.
absolutely. Absolutely. If we don't do what God wants us to do, he'll find somebody else.
But God's will be done.
Because God's will be done. And how many of us look at our problems as problems instead of looking at them as opportunities? Don't we all at times? But it's an opportunity to grow. It's an opportunity to get stronger. It's an opportunity to help others. It's an opportunity to learn.
It's an opportunity to see what God can do in our lives.
It's an opportunity to see what God can do in our lives. Absolutely. So it says in 1 Corinthians chapter 16, verses 13 and 14, be on the alert, stand firm in the faith, and act like men. Be strong. Let all that you do be done in love. Now, when it says be like men, remember that's not necessarily generic, but that means be strong. Look at who you're emulating. Are you trying to emulate a coward, or are you trying to emulate a strong person?
To be mature.
To be mature. Yes, Gary.
Even a moron can see what's coming.
Yeah.
The World Economic Forum, the politician, the world is explicitly telling us what they're doing.
Absolutely.
There's no excuse.
There's no excuse. Which is why we're getting these messages. Are we willing to stand and grow and be strong and come together? That's what we need to do. When we stand firm and stand in love for one another, that's your next feeling. When we stand in love for one another. The ones before that were the circumstances and opportunities. But that's when we have the victory.
You know, we never stop and think about it. And I think that Jenny just said it. God shares in our wilderness experience. Have you ever thought about that? He shares it. He's with us. He never, ever leaves us. When the people of Israel had rebelled and refused to enter the promised land, God turned them toward the wilderness. And they wandered until that generation of rebels died. But he did not leave them. He did not abandon. If you look at those years, it says, the Lord your God has blessed you in all the work of your hands. He's watched over your journey through this vast desert. And these 40 years, the Lord your God has been with you. And you've not lacked anything. I mean, he even said, you know, your clothes didn't wear out. Your shoes, the sandals of your shoes, the bottoms of your shoes didn't wear out. And yes, for us women, their feet didn't even swell. I mean, think about it, right? I mean, it's not like they could sit down on a recliner and put their feet up. They were on their feet. They walked through the dirt, and not even their legs swole. Yes.
He cared about them so much that didn't he actually give them a detour because there was one country that was at
Yes.
war and he
He said,
thought
don't
that if
go
they
in
saw
there. Yep. He said, you're not prepared for that yet. Don't go there, right? So there's no question that the years and the time in wilderness is harsh. It's harsh for us today. Nobody goes, yay, I want to take 2 years and go into that wilderness. We don't want to do that. But God does not abandon us, even in the wilderness. Yes, Gary?
Another point, from Goshen to the Red Sea, Sea of Surf,
Mm-hmm.
they marched 24/7.
Yes.
And when it talks about lifting on eagle's wings, even, I mean, there was old, there was feeble.
Yeah.
Now, how can they go 24/7 for what was almost like 5 days a week
Mm-hmm.
of nonstop? It was like a mighty wind that kind of carried them all along the way without stopping.
Mm-hmm.
When you're obedient to God, he will provide.
He's the wind under our wings, I guess, right? Absolutely. You know, again, we should fill in. God shares in our wilderness. 12, God shares in our wilderness. You know, we need to remember the victories to continue. Moshe went over all the victories. He said, do you remember this? Do you remember this? Do you remember this? Do you remember this? We get so caught up in remembering the oh my goshes that we don't remember the thises, right? We really don't. The eggs, now that may seem, well, phooey, that's just eggs. But was it a time of need? Was it almost desperate need? She didn't have any. And guess what? God provided. I don't know about you, but I'm very structured, in case you didn't notice. And what I do is when God shows me a promise, or if I have a need, and it's not just, well, you know, gosh, I wish I could have this, but it's a need in my life, whether it's for peace, whether it's for rest, whether it's for restoration, whether it's for my kids, whatever it is. I find that verse and I put the date on it. And then as I pray, and it may take 3 years before I see that God did that. It took 3 years for Eric to go from stage 4 cancer to where you're cancer free. Right? And it's been 18 years, 19 years, more than that now, 20 years, 25 years, and he is still cancer free. He had tumors the size of grapefruit around his kidneys. He did not lose a kidney. God is good. So then I can go back and at that date, I say that date that God fulfilled that promise. So when things get tough, right? If he did it then, he'll do it now.
Well, one thing about that too is it's not just did he do it, but in the meantime, Carol had to be obedient to what
Yes.
God was telling her to do. So
Oh,
it
yeah.
wasn't just pray for it and it happens. In the meantime, she had to be obedient.
Well, you know, God, we need to remember the victories and then continue to obey. And we need to have no idols, only God. And that's a fill-in. No idols, only God. And that means we ourselves can't be idols unto ourselves. We don't have it all together. You know, we're not all that in a bag of chips, right? And I know I've said this before, but I was in South Carolina and I was way late because of a storm. I couldn't fly out. And there was a huge Christian conference going on. And they were coming in buses to the hotel that I was at. And I was sitting there eating my lunch with my supper. And I always took a book or something. And I was sitting there. And there was a group of ladies, probably about 12 ladies sitting at this table. And they were ethnically different than I am. Okay? And as I was walking by them, to the elevator, God told me, you need to ask those ladies to pray for Eric. And you know, have you talked to yourself? They don't know me from Adam. They're going to think I'm stupid. They're going to think there's something wrong with me. Me, I, right? So was I the idol in place of what God was telling me? Well, I said, yeah. That can't be God. He's not gonna say something like that. So I get in the elevator, get ready to push the button, and God tells me, if you don't obey me, I will not heal him. I mean, I stopped that elevator. And I mean, it was just like somebody was standing there next to me. And it's because I had put myself in place of what God could do. So I went back, right? I squatted down beside that table. And of course, they're looking at me like there's something wrong with me. And I said, you don't know me from Adam. But God just told me. Let me tell you my situation. God told me that if I didn't ask you for prayers, he was not going to heal my son. And of course, by this time I'm blubbering, right? And these ladies said, oh, honey, we'll do that right now. And she said, not only that, we're going to have our conference pray for your son. And they gave me a name to call and to let them know what happened. But I firmly believe to this day that if I had not been obedient, because I was putting my feelings, my thoughts, my desires, my trepidation, my fear, God said, don't be afraid, because I've got this under control. And I've got that in the brightest magenta purple next to that promise. So when I say, well, yeah, no, well, yeah, but, yeah, but the world says we're going to heck in a handbasket, and woe is me. I go back to that and I think, if my God can put me in South Carolina and ask a group of people I have no idea who they are, or what, I know they were Christian, they were believers, they came from a church, but I have no idea what they believed.
You also realize that God provided that hotel for that conference at
Yes.
that time.
Prevision for provision, right? And those ladies to sit at that table, then he can do anything. And I can go back. It's called an Ebenezer. Whether you plant it in your backyard, whether you put it in the Bible, when the times get rough, you go back. I'm not on the throne. Biden definitely isn't on the throne, right? Gates isn't even in the same country, but God is the king. He is on the throne. Our discouragement belongs in the world. God is our oxygen for encouragement.
Goes right back to what we started with.
Biden sitting on.
Goes right back to what we started with. When we run into problems, who do we look to? Is it my problem that I've got to solve? Is it something I've got to work through? Or can I turn to God? Yes, he's going to have us do something. But when you turn to it and do what he has you do, number one, it's going to be easier. Number two, it's going to be less stressful. Yes, Jane.
These stories, they may seem like stories that are so fantastic that we can't even fathom. Who still is going to college at night, works all day doing yard sales, cleaning out storage units, all of this, has 2 invalid people in her household to take care of, is trying to get a college degree so that she can move on. This is in Idaho. And she's in some kind of a program you have to complete first 2 weeks of the program in order to get stipends through the government. And she has to have these stipends. Well, in the meantime, her house insurance was canceled because she hadn't done the household repairs on the outside of her house. She actually didn't have money to do that. And one of her granddaughters, a little 4-year-old, was having seizures for 30 days straight. Each day she was having a seizure. Having a difficult time getting the consensus of her college work done because she had all of these other factions, no food, no money, no procedures. And I told her, I said, you know, Jean, my problems are never going to be as serious. I told her about I said, we serve a God. She says, we have thousands of limitations, but
right? We're all these kind of things. But it's all about that even when everybody else deserts us, I will not. And we need to remember that. We are loved, therefore, we need to be loving, right? How God loved us? By loving others. We can go out and we can preach the word, and if we're a real twit, nobody's going to come to the Lord. Why would they want what we have if we're not lovable and loving?
You know, that especially goes for us in leadership. If we can't relate
Yes.
to you, and remember, we're here to serve.
Not only that,
We're
we're
not-
one of you.
Yeah, and we're one of you, but we're here to serve, not to be served. And if we can't impart that to you, what good is it? You're gonna look at us as somebody that's standoffish and not here to help, and we're gonna be useless. It's up to us too to impart to you and let you know that we're here to serve you
You know, and to share our struggles.
and to share our struggles.
How can you share with us if we don't share with you? We're that we are a family. The other thing is love is personal. Love is urgent. Love is demonstrated. And love is expressive. You know, so many people nowadays have a relationship with their phone. We actually had dinner one night, and there was a couple, and I don't know if they were on a date or not, but they were sitting across from each other, and they were on their phones. And I don't think they said 2 words during time. Maybe they were talking to each other by the phone. I don't know. You know,
Texting each other.
they were texting each other. But it's all about relationship. And so should not only our relationship with God is imperative, but our relationship with other believers in our family is absolute. And then what we're living, love, our relationships are urgent. As Gary said, and as Pastor Paul has been saying, you know, the time to demonstrate love and caring for each other isn't after everything's gone belly up, right? Those relationships have to be formed before it gets to the point that it's desperate. And it has to be demonstrated. How can I say, you know, something, oh, I am so sorry, and then leave? The one that I'm going to tell you the one that gets me. Can I tell you the one that gets me and you're not going to tell anybody? Right? Oh, I'm so sorry for that. I'll pray for you. Oh, yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
That just, oh. If God says to pray for that, let me pray for you in that instance.
Yeah.
Not walk away. Not walk away. Love is demonstrated.
Now, understand, there are some times when you can't necessarily stop and do it at that moment for one reason or another.
Go
but
find
that's
them
what you
after
need to.
service.
Then you go find them after service. Or
Pick
tell
up
them, I will be with you as soon as I can.
Pick up the phone. If you don't ever see people from our congregation, you never contact them, except what you see them and you walk in the door and say Shabbat Shalom, you have no relationship with them. Start developing relationships. Aren't you glad God doesn't do that? No, we're not, I don't have to tell you the whole scriptures. I don't have to read over you, Lord, my brother's in need. He's having issues in his life right now that he's just having a difficulty time dealing with. Be with him, lead him, give him wisdom, your wisdom, not the wisdom of the world, but your wisdom, Lord. And we thank you. Big deal. How long did that take? But are we doing it? Stop and think about it for a second. And it starts with you and you and you and you and you and you. One person can make a difference. Love is expressive. Somebody's sick, send them a card. Say hello. Engage them in conversation. I sat in service yesterday, and I sat in service up here Friday. People came in and sat down. Not one person said anything to them. We had new people at both congregations. I saw new people. Doug and I had the stuff yesterday, the kadoosh, and I saw these people. I didn't know them, and I didn't know if they were going to run out after service. You never know. Yeah. So I stepped down. I introduced myself. I wanted to let them know that someone saw them and cared. So love is expressive.
Fortunately, Gary saw him too.
Well, yeah, but if you don't, have you ever walked into a group and no one ever spoke to you? You make you feel like, well, gosh, nobody really cares. I have a real thing about, I want you to know that you've been seen, that I see you.
And further, not only I see you, but you are important to me.
That's right.
Yes, amen.
And I am glad that you are here.
That's right.
And I want you to come back.
Yes. Are we still giving the discs and the little things out that say, this is who I am, etc.? I don't think we're announcing in service anymore.
No.
Are you doing it when you walk in?
I do.
Oh.
When they walk in? When we collect
I
them?
have a problem because when I come in, like Pastor Bruce, I'm very introvert. I don't see anybody. And then I sit in the front. And I used to appreciate when the pastor would say, oh, look, we have a new people here.
Absolutely.
Can you stand up to the, and then I would say, oh, because sometimes I'll tell Felicia, are they from down the hill or are they new? I don't even know people.
We need to recognize new faces or somebody who hasn't been here for a while. We need to be able to express our love. Love communicates and expresses, and love desires a response. If you love with the love of Yeshua, Yeshua never said, now shut up, I'm never going to talk to you again. He talked to them and he wanted a response from them. I hear you. Neo-Phoenician woman, right? Yes, sir. You need to.
This is from a long time ago. A person, his wife left him for another man. And he was destroyed. His friend came over to his house, opened the door and said, what are you here to talk to me, give me advice? He says, no, I came to hurt with you.
Yep.
That's
And
what it
said
is.
no.
Yep.
You just
Yep.
sat, I'm here to hurt with you.
Yeah.
Yep. One of the things that because of my past experiences, I tell, especially, I relate really well to women, is that, something? If you just need somebody with you to cry, if you just need somebody with you to vent, I will sit there, I will not say a word. I just want to be with you.
And that's one thing we need to realize. We can't solve everybody's problems.
No, but we can be
But
there.
we can be there for it.
But we can be there. Love is unselfish. And love is the communication of a relationship. we have to give God priority.
Absolutely.
You know, first, the lover of God responds to God. We need to give God priority. Okay, you know, first, the lover of God, the person who loves God, has to respond to God, correct? Okay. Second, we need to share that which has taken root in our lives. And third, context in which the reality of God is shared is that of our daily life. We show the love of God in our daily life.
After third, sorry,
What?
third concept.
Third context in which the reality of God is shared is that of our daily life and our daily activities. Are we walking in such a manner and living in such a manner that that people see God in us? I know how many of us, when we have a friend who's a non-believer or doesn't go to our church, has an issue, they may come to you and ask for prayer because they see God in you, right? Do you know we are supposed to be the glory of God? And what does that word mean? Anybody can remember from Yeshua school? Yes, it's an accurate opinion of who God is to the world.
The one thing we need to remember too, when you need prayer, you shouldn't just have to go to a pastor or elder,
No.
although we are available, but you need to go to each other too. This is a family. It's not something that only certain people can do it.
No.
We need to work together.
Yeah, and we need to assume God's presence. God's presence just doesn't dwell in this building, right? God's presence dwells in us. So wherever we go, we take him. And we need to rely on his provision. You know, he'll give us the words to say. Sometimes we don't say a word. We just need to be there. But we need to do that. And then ultimately, we need to remember that in the middle of discouragement, in the middle of all the hooey stuff that's going on right now in our world, right, that we are safe in his hands. If nothing else, put that up on a board somewhere, that in the middle of turmoil, in the middle of confusion, in the middle of all the stuff that's going on, we are sealed and we are safe in his hands. And that's our study for today. Oh, yes, sir.
One last thing. Everything that has been said is good and true in the hearing of it.
Got to put it into action.
My next question is, out of all of those who have heard it, who will actually do it?
That's, you know,
That's the bottom line.
we can speak, we can talk, we can hand out until we're blue in the face.
What's it say? Be not hearers of the, just not be hearers, hearers. of the-
Doers. Mhm. Doers
Not be
only.
hearers only, but doers.
Doers.
So I hope and pray what has been said will be done.
Yeah.
You know, and each one of you can share. Share. So let's close. You wait for me. My colors clash terribly. That's a girl thing, by the way. Yes, it is.
Blessed are you, O Lord our God, King of the universe,
Who
who
gave us
the Torah of truth and planted everlasting life within us. Blessed are you, O Lord,
the
the giver of the Torah. Amen.
So go out
Thank
and
you.
do.